Hello, I'm Simon Knott, Principal of BKK Architects, and today I'm presenting Garden House, which was shortlisted in the Alterations and Additions category of the Victorian Architecture Awards. This is a house that I guess comes as a culmination of years of doing residential design and something we're enormously proud of. It's a smallish alteration to a house in an inner north of Melbourne. And really, this whole house is centred around the idea of a garden. This gives you a little bit of the context of the house, sitting within Fitzroy and just on the North Fitzroy, just before you go into East Brunswick, just near Merry Creek over here on the right, and a lovely little pocket of Melbourne. This gives you some of the context around it, sort of cafes, series, which is a great sort of environmental park, Melbourne, Velodrome, and close to Merry Creek as well. We like to do lots of these little studies to give us a kind of understanding of the context. There's a really sort of regular rhythm that gets set up across the front street of these houses. The main presentation to the street, mostly sort of Edwardian Victorian workers' cottages. And then there's this unusual rhythm of built yard back form, which is largely these ad hoc kind of additions. One thing we talk a lot about, this image on the left, is this gradient of public to private space. So that we start with a very public space of the street, and as you move through the house, there's a gradient of privacy that starts to weave itself through the way we deal with the spatial volumes of the house and the way you gain different levels of privacy as you move away into that backyard space. Looking at foliage patterns in garden is enormously important, as the image on the right, but also things like, presentation sensitive interfaces and also solar access, which is enormously important. And these sort of diagrams, through some careful modelling, we do this before we start design, is really about maximising solar penetration into the house. We also asked our clients to present a couple of images that weren't architectural, that weren't from magazines about architecture, that were more about them, the things that describe themselves or that they found interesting. And we found this a really useful tool to give a bit of insight into their characters. And this was the man of the house, and he presented this film poster from Interstellar, this idea of science fiction and things he liked about outer space, but also the wolf on the right too, and is self-described introvert. So he likes to think of himself as the sort of lone wolf, but also needs to be part of the pack. So there's this kind of dichotomy there between time on their own, but also time entertaining. And this is his wife's, this is the woman in the house. This is her, a couple of pieces. She grew up in the Otways near, this is Lake Elizabeth here on the left, a beautiful part of Victoria, quite picturesque, and this sort of wild landscape. And then on the right, the still life, which was very much a constructed landscape. So for her, that was the kind of a really interesting thing to put forward, this idea of the wild sort of landscape versus the constructed. And we also kind of look at this brief, and this was really, this is the first time we've done this in such a graphic way. We've done sort of variations on this before, but really consolidated this as a method of design in really starting to look at how you might do things around the house as a brief, rather than we try and steer our clients away from thinking I want, and this is a, really an idea that's perhaps driven from lessons from Robin Boyd and about how we occupy space. And that rather than saying I want a bedroom, a bathroom, whatever else, TV room, as people normally do within a brief, what we ask them to do is look at things that they would like to, activities they would like to undertake around the house. So it becomes less prescriptive as to what the space is and talks about how you occupy that space. And for us, this is a fundamental part of architecture, in that architecture is not about things, it's about people, it's not about objects, it's the space between, which is actually the place of occupation. And this is very much an idea that's derived from Robin Boyd and reading his writings about how we use space and understand architecture. From that, we took the existing part of the house there on the left. You can see that, and then this proposed addition to the rear. By cracking open the sort of house, we then arranged it back across the site, and this was the this is the resulting plan. You can see the existing cottage at the front and the addition to the rear. 4 rooms maintained on the left, and a bedroom, a TV room, a work from home study, become very valuable now, bathroom, laundry, and then you come into this new addition, which is the main living space. and then out to the main bedroom and ensuite at the rear. And very much it's about how this presents out to this garden space. It's all centered around this garden. But there's also lots of little incidental spaces within this house. It's lots of little spaces where you can sit one of you, two of you, but you can have gatherings together as well. It's more of a salon style of housing where there's a series of different spaces that are stretched across the site. As I said, moving from that very public space of the street through to the more private space of the garden at the rear. In elevation, I won't go into that too much. This is a good diagram showing the environmental performance of the house. Wanted to get it potentially carbon neutral. So it's fully electric house, no gas, all hydronic heating, runoff heat pump, the deep eaves for solar access. There's solar penetration right through the house here. Ventilation up at the high ends of these gables here. So it means you get great cross ventilation through the house. Black floors for high thermal mass, concrete masonry floors, and this concrete heat sink of a fireplace and curved wall that runs through the middle of the house, and also at the end here around the bathroom. And one thing we also do a lot of with our houses is to blower test them. So they're heavily sealed and insulated, which means we get great performance out of them. So it's very airtight, so you can really close it up and get fantastic performance out of your heating or cooling if you need. And then the garden. This was done by Mud Studio, a landscape studio. We've worked with Mira there for a very long time now. She's probably done her first house maybe 15 years ago and just did an extraordinary job with the garden. There's some existing trees here, which are really beautiful, that were retained, and sometimes during construction I didn't think they'd quite make it. There's some rocks that were pulled up from the excavation on the site, which we kept on the site and then reused throughout the garden. And you can see how this beautiful native garden then sort of weaves itself through, and you get this beautiful paving sort of bleeding out from that main living space. Down the right-hand side here, you see this, this bookshelf, which is really about giving the place its own character and the character of the individuals who live there. So all the things that they've collected throughout their life start to position themselves on this wall, and it becomes, you know, a really strong part of the house. There's that big masonry wall that anchors the house into the garden. And then this is the view leading back up to the existing part of the house. You can see the level shift as we move through the house there. Again, there's sort of layers of space as you move through. It's inside, outside, right through the bedroom with that round window at the end. And this is moving back into the existing house again. And you can see how that relationship plays right through as a spine of the house. This is the bathroom there, ensuite, right down at the end of the house, the most private perhaps part of the house, but it does again open out onto the garden. It's carefully screened so that you can sit here in the bath and really kind of open out the whole space and feel like you're bathing in the garden. This is looking back again, the other way from that, across to the basin. Beautiful basin by Archer Studio. And yeah, looking at tiles that really had a deep textural quality to them, you know, whether it was bricks or timber, that there was not a non-manufactured idea about them. They were sort of crafted. And that's actually the bathroom. That's actually the bedroom, that last slide. And out to the garden again, and this wonderful series of trees. And there's a Japanese maple at the other end as well. And I finally just wanted to talk to this fantastic piece by one of my favourite things in the awards, and one of the favourite bits of architecture for the year, I think, is Addition Office and Janiskas' pavilion at the NGV. And I think it's just such a moving bit of architecture, so simple in its execution, but layered with so much meaning. I think incredibly timely, and given the events we've seen happen since this piece was instituted there around the world, looking at how we might uncover the hidden secrets within our histories and confront the dark past. You know, Bruce Pascoe's fantastic book, Dark Emu, and I think this really just talks to the absence and the destruction of a whole culture that is so rich and so deep in meaning. And I think it's beautifully placed in the courtyard adjacent to the NGV, which really is, you know, a symbol of kind of colonialisation of Melbourne and Australia. So well done, guys and girl. Thank you.